Welcome back to Truth Decoded, where we dive deep into unsolved mysteries. July 8th, 1947, and at Roswell Army Airfield, Public Information Officer Walter Haut is at his typewriter, following direct orders from his base commander, drafting a press release that will reach every major wire service in the country within hours. The United States Army Air Force has recovered a flying disc. By that evening, the story is dead, replaced, and officially explained away. Why would the most powerful military apparatus on Earth volunteer that announcement and then immediately bury it? It is late June of 1947, and Rancher Mac Brazel is riding across the Foster Ranch, roughly 75 miles north of Roswell, when he comes across something the high desert of New Mexico has no business producing. The debris is not concentrated in one place. It is scattered across a field stretching nearly 3/4 of a mile in length, and what Brazel finds there stops him cold. Strips of material that look something like foil, but which cannot be creased or permanently bent. Thin beams, lightweight beyond reason, bearing what witnesses would later describe as unusual markings along their surfaces. Not quite letters, not quite symbols, but arranged with a deliberateness that made them impossible to dismiss as random scoring. Brazel gathers samples and, several days later, drives them into Roswell to report what he has found to the county sheriff. The sheriff calls Roswell Army Airfield, and that is when Jesse Marcel Sr. enters the record. Marcel is not a clerk or a logistics officer. He is the base intelligence officer, the man whose entire professional function is to identify what he is looking at. On July 7th, 1947, Marcel drives out to the Foster Ranch with a counterintelligence corps officer, and together they spend hours collecting material from the field. Marcel loads his car. He is, by every account from that day, not confused about what he is handling. He later described the foil-like material as something that, when crumpled in the hand, would unfold itself back to its original shape without a single crease remaining. He described the beams as extraordinarily light, yet resistant to any force he could apply. He is a man trained to assess unknown materials in the field, and his assessment, at that moment, is that nothing in his experience accounts for what he is holding. He brings the material back to Roswell Army Airfield. His commanding officer, Colonel William Blanchard, does not order a quiet internal review. He orders Walter Haut to issue the press release. The same press release the Hook established, the one that reaches the wire services and ignites headlines across the country on July 8th. The Army Air Force has recovered a flying disc. That is the official statement, issued under official orders from an official press information officer. Then, within hours, Brigadier General Roger Ramey in Fort Worth takes control of the narrative. He calls his own press conference. He poses for photographs with material spread across the floor of his office, material he identifies as the wreckage of a weather balloon and a radar reflector. The photographs are wired nationally. The story collapses. By the following morning, the flying disc has become a balloon, and most of the press moves on. Here is where the dramatic weight of the record begins to accumulate. Marcel is present at Ramey's office in Fort Worth. He is in one of those photographs, and decades later, long after his military career had ended, long after there was nothing professional to gain and nothing institutional to protect, Marcel would state clearly that the material displayed on the floor of Ramey's office was not the material he recovered from the Foster Ranch. It had been substituted. What he brought from the field was gone, replaced with something ordinary enough to be photographed and forgotten. This is not the claim of a fringe figure operating outside the documented record. This is the base intelligence officer of Roswell Army Airfield, a man with a documented military history and a professional obligation to accurate assessment, saying that the United States Army Air Force showed the world a different object than the one he recovered. The weather balloon explanation does not merely fail to answer the question Brazel's debris field raised. It introduces a new one, and that question has a name attached to it, Jesse Marcel Sr., who spent the remaining years of his life insisting the substitution happened. If Marcel is telling the truth, then the most powerful military force on Earth swapped out physical evidence in broad daylight. Does that sound like a cover-up to you? Or do you think there's another explanation? Drop your answer in the comments below, because what happens next to the witnesses who kept talking makes the substitution look like the least troubling part of this story. 31 years after Walter Haut typed that press release under orders, the man who had been silenced finally spoke. It is February of 1978, and Jesse Marcel, retired now, no rank to protect, no commanding officer to answer to, sits down with ufologist Stanton Friedman and breaks 3 decades of institutional silence. Marcel, then a retired lieutenant colonel, told Friedman that he believed the Roswell debris was extraterrestrial. More precisely, he stated what the previous section established was already implied by his behavior in July 1947. The weather balloon explanation had been a cover story, and the photos had been staged, with weather balloon debris being substituted for the real wreckage. The base intelligence officer of Roswell Army Airfield, the man trained and paid to identify unknown materials, was now on record saying the United States Army Air Force had shown the world a different object than the one he recovered from the Foster Ranch. That statement from that man is not a fringe allegation. It is a documented claim by a credentialed military officer, and it did not stand alone for long. In 1991, retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Thomas DuBose, who had posed with debris for press photographs in 1947, acknowledged that the weather balloon explanation for the material was a cover story to divert the attention of the press. DuBose was Ramey's chief of staff. He was in the room, he was in the photographs, and 44 years after the fact, he confirmed what Marcel had said 13 years earlier. The explanation offered to the world was not the truth. 2 senior military officers, independently, across different decades, describing the same institutional deception. The pattern does not repeat by accident. Then comes the sharpest piece of evidence in the entire record, and it arrives deliberately from beyond the grave. Walter Haut, the man who typed the original press release, the same press release the Hook established, the one that reached every wire service in the country on July 8, 1947, had requested that certain material be kept confidential during his lifetime. Prior to his death, ufologist Donald R. Schmidt conducted interviews with Haut covering this material. Schmidt composed an affidavit which Haut signed on December 26, 2002, at the International UFO Museum and Research Center in front of his daughter, a staff notary, and a museum guest. Schmidt and the family agreed not to release this document until after Haut's death. Haut died on December 15, 2005 at the age of 83. The document was then released to the public. What it contained was not a vague endorsement of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. It was a specific, notarized first-person account from the man who typed the original press release. In the affidavit, Haut alleged that Colonel Blanchard personally escorted him to Hangar 84 on July 8, 1947, to view an intact egg-shaped craft approximately 12 to 15 feet long and 4 to 5 alien bodies with large heads. Samples of wreckage were passed around the table, material unlike anything he had or had ever seen in his life. Pieces which resembled metal foil, paper thin yet extremely strong, with unusual markings along their length, were handled from man to man, each voicing their opinion. No one was able to identify the crashed debris. And critically, in a detail that locks directly onto what Marcel had already testified, Haut's affidavit states that upon Marcel's return from Fort Worth, Marcel described to him taking pieces of the wreckage to General Ramey's office and, after returning from a map room, finding the remains of a weather balloon and radar kite substituted while he was out of the room. Marcel was very upset over this situation. They would not discuss it again. 2 men, the same substitution, described independently across different decades, now both documented in the permanent record. Now set that against what the Air Force offered in response. In 1994, U.S. Air Force report identified the crashed object as a Project Mogul device, a military surveillance program employing high-altitude balloons to monitor nuclear tests. Project Mogul explained the debris field. It did not explain the substitution Marcel described. It did not explain why DuBose called the weather balloon story a cover. It did not explain why Haut, the man who typed the official announcement, sealed a contradicting account for release only after his death. The Air Force's second report, released to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the incident, suggested that witnesses who claimed to have seen bodies had actually conflated the 1947 crash with later tests in which anthropomorphic crash test dummies were dropped to test military parachutes. The dummies were used from 1953 to 1959. The witnesses placing bodies in a Roswell hangar were describing July 8, 1947. The Air Force's own explanation requires the witnesses to have misremembered events by more than half a decade. Each official report introduced a new problem rather than resolving the old one. Marcel's accounts, which evolved from 1978 onward to describe indestructible debris, but not intact craft or bodies, diverge in specifics from Haut's 2002 description. And these non-identical testimonies from involved personnel, combined with Haut's prolonged silence on personal sightings, highlight the genuine contestation in the record. Some witnesses, like Frank Kaufman, were later found to have fabricated portions of their testimony entirely. This is precisely why the record is genuinely contested, rather than a clean conspiracy. The honest accounting of Roswell demands that both things be true simultaneously. Some witnesses lied, and the US government's own officers, Marcel, Dubose, Haut, still cannot be reconciled with each other, or with any official explanation the Air Force has produced across 7 decades. The man who typed the press release, the man who recovered the material, and the general's own chief of staff have never told the same story as the institution they served. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is the documented record, and it remains to this day officially unresolved. Subscribe for more cases where the official story collapsed under its own contradictions.